All right. Assalamu alaikum. I greet you with the traditional greetings of peace that we as Muslims greet one another with and with others with as well. So to start off with, my name is Susie, and I am actually not from Allentown. I am from New Jersey. So driving over here this morning, there was quite a bit of traffic on 95. But I have worked frequently with the Lehigh Valley community in Allentown, and I know Neji very well. And when he invited me to come here, I thought it was a great opportunity because as Muslim Americans, we are living in a time where we want to be understood. We want to reach out and kind of shake those media misconceptions that are out there. And any opportunity where can speak, where we can open up, where we can share with you and answer any questions that anyone may have, I think is a good opportunity. So a little bit about myself. I am a mother of 3 beautiful children. My oldest is almost 15, and I have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. I am a visiting professor at DeVry University in the field of communication. I'm a high school English teacher. I also teach public speaking and career planning. I am an author, so I have a couple of books that are out there. A speaker, I travel frequently to speak on different topics related to Islam, women, and the field of communication. And I run a counseling center called Cornerstone. Cornerstone has been my passion for the past several years. We began as a program focused on helping people who are struggling in marriages and families, and we've expanded in recent years to address youth issues. And what we've found is that as a faith-based relational communication center, we've found that one of the greatest difficulties that is facing our Muslim American community today, that is facing our youth, is an issue of identity. It's an issue of wondering how they can define who they are, what it means to be an American, what it means to be a Muslim American, what it means to be a Muslim Arab American. And these are questions that I think all of us have struggled with regardless of our background, coming here to the US, if we've been here for, since our birth, or if our parents immigrated here generations and generations ago. So what we are seeing today in the Muslim American community are these same profound questions. And the answers, I think, are answers that we who work in the community, who work with the youth, who work with the younger generation, are trying to answer. So for me, being a Muslim American woman means many things. It means that I wake up at 5:15 every morning to pray. It means that as soon as I'm done with prayer, I go to the gym, to boot camp, and get yelled at by my personal trainer for the donuts I ate the night before. It means that I get stuck in traffic. It means that I have bad days. It means that I love, watching The Flash with my family. It means that I'm secretly a big fan of the Twilight series. It means that my American identity does not defy my Muslim faith. It means that I am a Muslim American, that I can practice my faith, that I can begin everything with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Not because it has some hidden agenda or some meaning or affiliation with another group, but because it reminds me that my faith keeps me anchored, that it's a faith of mercy, a faith of compassion. And it reminds me that everything that I do day in and day out revolves around that faith, that mercy, that compassion, whether it's being with my children, being at work, teaching my students, counseling, or speaking to groups of people very similar to those who are here. So I don't want to take up too much time because I want to give Naji also a chance to speak and share his thoughts. But it's really an honor and a privilege to be here with you today, to share a little bit about who I am. And I don't pretend to speak for the entire community of Muslim Americans today, but I do want to speak for me because I think getting to know someone, getting to understand what it means to be a Muslim American, face to face, speaking to someone, is the best tool out there to educate, to encourage, and to kind of expand our connections with one another.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May peace and blessing of God be upon all of you. My name is Naji Latifa, and I came to this country in 1984 from the Gaza Strip. And at that time, if you're old enough to remember, Reagan was the president, and it was the invasion of Grenada, and I was terrified. I don't want to come here. But my dad was in Saudi Arabia and had very positive view of the United States and you had to come here. I said, can I go anywhere else in Europe? Said, nope, you have to go to the United States. And I came to the Philadelphia area. I went to University of Pennsylvania. And within a few weeks, I was trying to find ways to stay in this country. So this country has given me tremendous opportunity, not only for me, but all for the Muslims, everybody that I have talked to, and professional level, economic level. It's been a wonderful thing for many of us. At the higher, if you look at it globally or from a larger view, we do have challenges. And by the way, I got to Allentown by taking 476, if you know. So I lived in Philadelphia for a long time. I went to Temple University. And in 1985, the Villanova Wildcats won the NCAA championship. And from that year, I said, I want to go to Villanova. So after I finished my undergrad at Temple, I went to Villanova to do my graduate work. And I stayed there for a few years near King of Prussia, worked for a small company. Then I went to work for Lucent Technologies in Allentown, AT&T and the Bell Labs and all of these things. And everybody that I tell nowadays, I used to work for Lucent Technology, they look at me, I lost a lot of money in this company. So don't blame me for that. And now I am an engineer by profession. I work for Intel Corporation as an engineering manager. And up until recently, I was the president of the Muslim Association of Lehigh Valley, which is in Allentown, basically the whole area. And as Stan said, there is a lot of Christian and Arab community in Bethlehem. They all came to work for the Bethlehem Steel. There are people that go back about 100 years into Allentown. And the Muslim community there is growing tremendously. And we have even this whole area here in Philadelphia in 1984-85, if you wanted to go to pray in a mosque, you'll have to go. There is in Girard Street, if you know the area, and there is a few of us, maybe 20 or 30 people will pray in a basement. Now, if you're in the Philadelphia area, you're not more than 5 minutes away from a mosque, wherever you go, whichever direction. So, I recently I was in Saudi Arabia doing my Umrah, my small pilgrimage, and people were surprised that given all the rhetorics that they hear from here, that you could, as a Muslim, you can practice your religion, you could go to the mosque and you can openly say that you're Muslim, or your wife can walk in the street with a hijab and nobody bothers her. And for the most part, we're really good. I mean, we have good connections with the government officials, local politicians, and we still see there is a lot of bigotry among, toward Muslims. There is hard bigotry like the one that's coming from certain candidates, mainstream candidates, the things that they're saying about Islams and Muslims. If I told you this will be happening in the United States 5 years ago, you'll think I was crazy or smoking something. But it's happening, and it's a huge concern for us because of our kids, like the people that came from the old countries like me. Yeah, we have tough skins, and we could settle, and we could close in and let it go. But our kids cannot. Our kids are having difficulties with this, and our kids that go to school every day and do the Pledge of Allegiance and say, Dad, why can't a Muslim be a president? Why can't a Muslim do this? And these are the things that we are trying to have our children deal with, because we don't want them to be isolated. We don't want our kids to feel they're not part of this culture. We don't want them to go into dark zones and do what other people do, like in Europe. The problem with I'm sure security and terrorism in the mind of everyone when it comes to talk about Muslims. And if you heard about what happened in Brussels recently, and most of these kids that are doing these attacks, their parents came and to work in the coal mines in Belgium. And they made some money, but they have always the locals have always looked them as an outcast. So they made a lot of money. The next generation maybe worked a little bit and made some more money, but the generation after that, they have an identity crisis. They're not totally Moroccans or Muslims, and they're not totally Belgian. And look what happens. They go to drugs, they look to crimes, and look what that leads to. We don't want this to happen to our kids. The problem that we see today, our kids, they go to school. You're not good enough. Your religion has a problem. It's like if you're watching hockey and you talk about spearing. If somebody keeps coming to you and poking you in the side here and there, and then somebody else just walks by you and you take the gloves off and it's an all-out fight. We don't want this to happen here. And we need support and help from all major organizations, people to stand up. Like what Trump says, whatever he says, and all the Republicans say he does not speak for us. We want those Republicans that say he does not speak for us to stand up with a Muslim, to hire a Muslim man or a woman in their office, to go to Muslim events, to go to mosque. We have in Allentown, if you know about the Pennsylvania politics, Senator Pat Toomey. He was our congressman in Lehigh for a long, long time. And then he became a senator. And we tried to invite him for sharing iftars that we do for all the politicians in our area. And for the last 6 years, every time we invite him for something, a conflict happens in the schedule. Oh, he cannot attend because of scheduling conflict. Then we said to him, okay, give us any data from here until the next 6 years, and we'll make it happen. And that date never came. And we also heard recently, like in the last couple of days, this is like we have hard bigotry, but we also have soft bigotry from the other side, from Democrats. We heard something in BuzzFeed yesterday about Senator Harry Reid, the minority leader in the Senate, that's trying to discourage a Muslim man for running for Congress in Arizona or Nevada because of his identity. He told him, you cannot run, you will not win because you're Muslim. Can you imagine if anybody goes to somebody and say, you cannot run for Congress, you cannot run for this because you're an African American or because you're Jewish or because you're white or because you're dark. Hell will break loose. So we do have challenges, and we need to, Muslims need to double down in their good efforts. They need to double down on their outreach. They need to double down and going with their neighbors. We need to change that. But also, this is all a retail stuff. Muslims need to have comedians, because people look at Muslims and they think, why are they always angry and upset? And I don't blame them. Like, I work with a lot of Americans, and they have a lot of anxiety about Muslim, even the one that knows you, because all they hear about is like a Muslim blew up here, a Muslim blew something up here, and the only common thing between them is their faith. But we need to have close engagement with our neighbors, with our politicians, and we also, Muslims, have to come, and instead of all being doctors, by the way, many Muslims are doctors, many Muslims are engineers. We don't have people that work in the media. We don't have enough lawyers. We don't have enough comedians or people to try to demystify this Islamic thing or being a Muslim. So I could keep going for a long time.
Well, I certainly admire your passion, but Susie, you are a high school English teacher. And I have to say, I used to be a high school English teacher. And I empathize with you because it was the toughest job I ever had, and diplomacy was much easier, I can assure you. But you converted to Islam.
No, my story, I was born Muslim. I get this question frequently because my name is Suzy, S-U-Z-Y. And I think, it tells an interesting tale, my name. When my parents immigrated to the US from Egypt over 40 years ago, they came to the US wanting to fit in. Their goal was to fly under the radar and just be as American as possible. So the only person my mom had gotten to know really well when she first came here was a hairdresser named Nancy. So my oldest sister, when she was born, she was named Nancy after the hairdresser. So the hairdresser Nancy purchased for my sister Nancy a doll when she was, when I was about to be born, when my mom was expecting me. And the doll's name was Cutie Susie. So in the hospital, my parents were going to name me Cutie because it was the only other American name they knew at that time. But thankfully, the nurse kind of suggested that they use Susie instead. So that's how I got my name, Susie. And it's interesting because I think when I look at, I have 3 sisters, and when I look at our names, it shows me kind of the transition that my parents went through in understanding what it means to be a part of not necessarily a melting pot, but a salad bowl, which is the analogy I think that is most currently used for the US. And what that means is that you can retain your identity, that it's the beauty of what you've brought with you from back home that makes the United States of America so diverse and so amazing to live in. And so as you see the transition, my oldest sister is Nancy, I'm Susie. My youngest sister, who came 7 years later, my younger one, her name is Naveen, which is a cultural name, but not a religious name. And my parents named her that because at that point they were getting more comfortable telling people, oh, we're Egyptian or we're from Egypt, but they weren't fully comfortable with the Muslim part quite yet. And then my youngest sister, who was born 13 years after that, is named Rahma, which is as Muslim of a name as you can get, you know, and it means mercy. And it really shows to me the evolution and the stages that my own family went through in understanding what does it mean to be a Muslim Arab American. So I do have to answer this question quite frequently about why is your name Susie? But I think, you know, I'm proud of the name that I was given by my parents because I feel like it does represent a great slice of the struggle that they kind of went through as well to try to facilitate for me and my sister a life here in the United States of America where we can grow to feel comfortable, where we can grow to understand who we are. But it's difficult, and I mean, I think we've all, like I mentioned before, struggled with identity no matter where we've grown up with. You know, I grew up reading the Sweet Valley Twins books and the Babysitter's Club, and I remember I would read these books, and I always wondered, you know, why don't I have blonde hair and blue eyes like Elizabeth and Jennifer? You know, why doesn't my family sit in the Spanish tiled kitchen every morning and have waffles and eggs? Instead, you know, we get mashed beans for breakfast every morning. And I grew up thinking that. So when I was expecting my first child and I was put on bed rest, I didn't know what to do with myself. So my husband suggested, he said, why don't you write a book? You've always been complaining about the books that you grew up reading. He said, write the book that you want your daughter to read. And so I did. I wrote a book called The BFF Sisters. Now, interestingly enough, the launch date for the BFF Sisters was scheduled for September 12th, 2001. And then September 11th happened. And I remember my daughter, actually her due date was September 11th, 2001. And she was born a little bit earlier. She was born at the end of August. And I remember sitting at home, you know, I was on maternity leave and I had my daughter in my arms and I was trying to figure out logistics of sitting and things because my book launch was set for the next day. And my husband called me from work and he said, you know, turn on the TV, look what's going on. And I did. And I saw the towers coming down. Now, I used to work in Standard & Poor's, which is a financial company on Wall Street, right across from the World Trade Center. And I used to travel through the World Trade Center every morning. And I sat there watching as this chaos was unfolding. And I remember I just kept thinking, I wonder if that nice guy who works at Sbarro's, the pizza place, who always gives me a free slice, is okay. That was all I could think of at that moment. And I kept thinking, you know, are my coworkers, are they all okay? Is everyone all right? Never in a million years did I imagine what would occur after September 11th. What would occur to my identity? What would occur to the questioning of who we are or how American we are? So my book launch was delayed until December of 2001. And the BFF Sisters is a story of young American girls who befriend a Muslim Arab American girl and begin to understand that there is nothing wrong with being different. That part of that difference is what makes us stronger and better.
Could you reflect a little? Those of you who were at our last conference, we had it in New York City, and we visited the site of the Twin Towers, and it was extremely moving, and I know you react to that and you reflect on it. Can you elaborate a little bit on how the atmosphere after September 11th affected you and the Muslim community in this particular region? And I say that because it's more than academic. With the huge influx of Arabs and Muslims into Europe these days, many of your countries are facing the same kinds of issues. And homogeneous societies are very rare. And it's very difficult to maintain a homogeneous society in today's multilateral and multilingual world with immigration and emigration and travel. And I don't think any country can sustain a singular identity. And I remember, I won't mention the country, but I had a tour in Western Europe, my last foreign service assignment, or next to last. It was a big city. And I said, it was a very safe city. And said, you can walk around at night, nobody bothers you, but don't go in this particular district. And I said, well, why not? And they said, well, that's where the Muslims are. And we keep them in that particular district. But anywhere else, it's the safest place in the world. And I said, well, how long can you maintain this? I mean, clearly you can't isolate your Muslim citizens or your Muslim immigrants much longer. And he said to me, he looked at me and he said, I said, why do you keep them there? Why don't you move to integrate them? And he said, because we thought they'd go home, which I thought was such a sad, plaintive cry that, you know, they're not going home. And I think this is something that all our nations are dealing with, especially now in Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, with the influx of refugees. Some might go home, but they're not all going home. And the pressure is on these nations to integrate. Nobody's got an easy answer, and nobody's got a crystal ball, and nobody does it in a perfect way or a perfect manner. And I think September 11th shocked the conscience of this nation. But can you reflect, perhaps both of you, a little more on what that day meant to you? And also, we would be remiss if we did not bring in today's political campaign and some of the comments made by some of the candidates about Muslims. And the pressure must be enormous. And how do you deal with that? And this is not a value judgment. And the U.S. political system is bizarre and very strange, as all of you know, and I know you're following it closely because the results really do have an impact on your nations. And there is some anti-Muslim sentiment mixed into the political campaign, and I'm kind of wondering how you react to all that, or what the ramifications are for you as American Muslims.
All right, so I think the hardest thing to deal with on a day-to-day basis is the questioning. You know, when you had mentioned that, you know, these Muslim refugees are not going home, the first thing that stuck in my mind, or the first response that came to my mind, was because they probably feel that they are home. That when a nation opens its doors to a people who are escaping persecution, who are escaping difficulty, who are escaping starvation, who are escaping bombs and threats and terror, when a nation opens their door to a people like that, those people are grateful. Those people want to call this nation home, very much like my parents did, very much like Naji did when he came here, very much like I do every day. This is my home. This is my parents' home. This is my neighbor's home, my community's home. And I think until we start looking at the influx of Muslims from around the world into these other nations as people who are making a new home, finding a place to call home, until we start doing that, we're going to consistently face those identity crises. We're going to face those situations where people start to question where they belong or if they belong. You know, one of the books that I've written is called 9 to 5, Muslims in the Western Workplace. And it really focused on my doctoral work in the field of organizational communication. And it looked at what it meant to be a Muslim in America post 9/11. I gathered stories from people in different sectors, you know, in different corporations, in different fields, doctors, engineers, teachers, artists, and people who were working in the financial world, people who were working in New York at the time of September 11th. Each story was different, yet each story had a thread that was the same. And that thread that kind of connected all of the stories was a thread of fear. Almost every story that I gathered had some kind of a vein of fear in it, a questioning of what's going to happen to me. What am I going to have to face? Now, interestingly enough, when my book 9 to 5, when the proof came out, the publisher had chosen a cover that it was supposed to represent corporate America, I guess, but it was 2 tall towers with the sun kind of shining between the 2 towers. And the publisher sent me a copy, and I said, oh, this looks nice, you know, it looks pretty and everything. And then the marketing department called me right afterwards, and they said, I don't think this is a good idea. And I said, why? I love the cover, it's pretty, it looks nice, it's shiny, you know. He's like, I don't think this is a good idea. That's representative of the Twin Towers. And to me, that was very shaking because, yes, there were 2 towers. Yes, I used to work near those 2 towers. Many Muslim Americans worked in those 2 towers. Yes, those 2 towers don't exist anymore. Yes, it was a tragedy. that we are still struggling to understand and to make sense of. For those of us living in the Northeast region who work in New York, who interacted there, many of us lost people who were very dear to us, friends and relatives and family. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about it. It doesn't mean that we have to be afraid. And there were many people that I tried to interview for this book who declined the interview because they said, well, I don't know. They could use something against me. And my question was, who is they? And why would you be so afraid?
Yeah, okay. The Muslim community is under a lot of stress and anxiety now. And the reason is, obviously, it became okay to come and talk about Muslim, dehumanizing them, basically. And yes, maybe everybody's awake and Trump is so bad that he's not going to make it. But somebody else with the same message one day might come that's more eloquent, more articulate, that will come but have the same ideas. So for Muslims, it puts tremendous pressure on us, like whenever anything happens. And I tell you right now, everyone in the Muslim community is so anxious, like, God, if something happens between now and the election, Trump is going to be the president, or whoever the Republican nominee is. Every time something happens anywhere, it's like we lost our humanity because if something bad happens and people die, the first thing in our mind, let's pray it's not a Muslim that did this. That's because of tremendous pressure that's put on us by the media, by other people, and everybody comes to us, oh, Muslims don't condemn X, Y, and Z. So we start playing these games as, okay, what do you want us to do? You should just condemn. Okay, we condemn in the strongest possible term. Oh, this is not good enough. What's good enough? Do it this way. Okay, we do whatever is being asked from us to do by everything. So it does not get covered. And then when we go full force, do whatever we want to do, it's like, do you really mean it? So this is the people that, coming from all countries do this. So the young people say, Ammo, uncle, why are you doing this? This is crazy. You're just playing their game. So if somebody goes, like when a white man does something, if all the white men and the white organization go condemn it, then we condemn everything that a Muslim does. So we are equal here, and we're not going home, Sam, because this is home. I go to Gaza sometimes, and I can't wait to I go there to see my mom and father and sisters, and I can't wait to come back. It doesn't matter. Everybody that tells you, yes, I want to go back home, they're not telling the truth, because they go, they try it, and they come back here, and they love it. Even if the parents love it there, back there, the kids love it more here. We're not going anywhere. We're staying here. We pay taxes. Yes, you came and your parents came maybe in boats. We came in a plane, but we're as American as everybody else. We took the oath to protect this country, and we'll do this, we'll continue to do it. Yes, we have challenges. We need to rise up, and Muslims are dealing with this in some ways. They're getting organized. They're starting to understand the political process. They're contributing. They're trying to find candidates that are inclusive of them. Just imagine in this country, like if you heard last month when in Michigan, the media was stunned that Muslims will vote for a Jewish guy when they vote for Bernie Sanders. And this is this narrative that goes in that Muslims are anti-Semite or anti-this or anti-that. Muslims are not anti-anyone. Muslims are with people that are inclusive, that are treated as normal human being, equal citizen, and things will change. As you see now, if you look at people my age, you will see a lot of physicians, a lot of engineers. Their kids are lawyers, they're in business, they're in studying journalism, and things will change. The Muslim narrative will change. The Muslim, people are taking full advantage of being American and just thinking about things in the American way, not the Arab way or the Muslim way from the old country. So I'm very hopeful that we will weather the storm. Yes, there will be issues. Yes, will be trouble. People sometimes in Allentown, I get calls from the FBI all the time. It's like, oh, we went to this guy's house and his wife said she doesn't know him. I mean, I was the president of the Muslim Association of Lehigh Valley, as I said, and I know all of the local enforcement, local police enforcement, FBI. So every time there is something, okay, do you hear anything? Is there chatters? So this guy, they were nervous, like it's her husband, and she says she doesn't know him. I said, duh. My wife, you've met my wife, you've seen it at the mosque, we've seen, if you go to her now and ask for me, she'll tell you she doesn't know me. because of everything, guys, all the crap things that you do to try to get Muslims in trouble. So we do have issues. We do have issues with police. We do have issues with profiling. We do have issues here and there, but we challenge them. We think there is a fair and just system here, and we'll continue to do what we need to do to spread our message and to interact and hope for the best. And hopefully Trump does not win.
Well, thank you. You know, all of you people have the privilege of being assigned to your embassies here in the United States. And this is one of the most complex countries in the world. And it's always been my view as an ex-diplomat that the better you understand the country where you're assigned, the better able you are to communicate what's going on to your government. And that serves our interest, and it serves the interest of your government. United States is a terribly complex place. It is a nation of immigrants. That's what it was founded on. And what we're going through now is another phase of that, for better or for worse. This has never been a homogeneous society, and many of your nations that were essentially homogeneous societies can no longer attest to that because times are changing. And many of your nations face the same kind of issues that ours do today. So let me open it up for some questions very briefly. One over there, please.
Bernhard Altesberger from Germany. Thank you very much. First of all, was there atmospherically a difference in the aftermath of 9/11 as you observed it at that time, and as you're referring today to the campaign? And I think terror attacks by Muslims have happened long before. So I think it's a little bit too limited to link it to the campaign. But I'm interested in, was there a difference in atmosphere? And second, I want to get back to the topic of identity. As you mentioned, is it identity that drives the young generation along the wrong avenue, the terror avenue? And if yes, what has to be done to counter that lack of identity? Why is it, as you say, there was much more identity before when your parents arrived, as you grew up here and you identify? Why is it, if it's identity and not poverty or lack of opportunity, why is it if it's identity? Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to start by answering the last question, and I'll work my way back to the first one. The question of whether or not it's identity. It's hard to isolate motivation and put it into a neat package as much as we'd like to, label it with just one. But, as Sam had mentioned, I am an English teacher in high school. I also teach at the university. But my heart and my passion and my soul is Cornerstone, the organization that I run, which is a counseling organization. My field is communication, which means I've spent years of my life studying what it means to communicate. How do you connect with people? What does it mean when you do something with your eyes in a certain way, or you stand in a certain way, or you inflect your voice in a certain way? And I think what we don't realize is that a lot of times identity is also linked to communication. And what we're seeing today consistently, even in the difficulties that we see that come to the counseling center, is that with the onslaught of online communication, with the expansion of the internet, with the use of social media across countries and nations where some people don't have the resources to be able to have a full education, but they still have resources to be able to access the internet. And what we're seeing is that what is being communicated online to a lot of young folks around the world are messages that are counterintuitive to a positive message or a positive goal of trying to allow people to understand who they are, what their faith is, what it means to be a Muslim. So when I talk about identity being an issue, it's not just, America is shutting out young Muslims, or anywhere in the world, Germany or Finland or wherever is shutting out young Muslims, and this is why they are turning to extremism. It's much bigger than that. It's the fact that many of these youth don't even understand what their faith tells them. It is the fact that communication has become so streamlined now through one modality of the online resources that it has become very easy for a young man, for example, living in Pakistan, who may not have the resources to continue his education, who winds up having to drop out of school. Or, we can take an example of Mohammed Bouazizi of Tunisia, who was the man who is kind of credited with starting the Arab Spring, which we all know has not been quite as much of a spring as we had hoped for. But he was a fruit vendor. He had dreams of going to university. He wanted to get out of his life of day in and day out just toiling in a country where he felt like he had no voice, where he was never heard. He had several brothers and sisters. He had to drop out of the university in order to become a fruit vendor. And to add, insult to injury, he was standing there vending his fruit, and he was consistently harassed by the police, who to him represented that big bad government that was repressing him, that wasn't allowing him to continue his dream. And when his brothers and sisters were asked after his death, what was his dream? They said he had given up the dream of university. His dream was to buy a white van and just be able to pick up tourists and show them Tunisia, show them their country, his country. Things got so bad for him after he was slapped in the face by a female police officer. And again, if we understand the dynamics of gender equity or inequity in the Middle East, we'll understand that that was the biggest insult that someone could have occur to them. Following that, he self-immolated. He stood in the square in public and burned himself to death. Just imagine that. The hardest way for a person to go. What type of frustration must you have? What type of questions of identity, what type of lack of anchoring and connection to anything bigger must you have gone through to burn yourself alive? And that's why we say that was the match that set the Middle East on fire. But that's just one match of many. There are a million Mohammed Bouazizis out there. There are a million young people here in the US, abroad, in the refugee camps that are popping up all over now. And these people are young people who feel like they have no options. They feel like they have no choices. So when we talk about identity, it's bigger than just, well, you're welcome here, you're American, or you're welcome there. It's much bigger than that. Those women in Saudi Arabia who are consistently told, you're not allowed to drive. The religion says you have to cover your face. You're not allowed to have a voice. This isn't part of our religion. This isn't part of Islam. But the education is being denied to these generations of people. And when you withhold the education about what a faith truly means, people begin to believe whatever they're fed. So I know that's kind of, it might have branched off from the identity question, but I think the second part of it is what can be done. Nelson Mandela once said that the most powerful weapon with which we can change the world is education. And that is what needs to happen. I say this as a teacher, I say it as a professor, I say it as a mother, I say it as an American. We need more education. We need to reach out, connect with people, and make them understand who they are from a faith-based perspective, and also who they are from a cultural and human perspective as well.
Okay, a couple more questions very briefly.
I think it's over here, Stan. Bengt Svensson, Embassy of Sweden. Thanks for excellent briefing. I have a question because I think you have an experience of integration, but also of de-integration, as you mentioned earlier. And my country received about 170,000 refugees last year, most of them Muslims. And what advice would you give to my country to integrate them? What should we do first, and then secondly? Thank you.
Well, in Allentown was one of the first cities that took Syrian refugees here. Last November, or actually September, we received about 9 families in Allentown, and the Allentown mayor was in the forefront of this whole thing, welcoming them. There obviously was some backlash all over the place. The governor of Pennsylvania came and out with a statement, was very supportive of resettling refugees here. And we had an event for these refugees to welcome them in Allentown. We had a church that seated about 500 people, standing room only. And there are 2 or 3 guys that came out and just were opposing to this. And they are the guys that got most of the attention from the media. I think the thing is, you help them, enable them to live their life, to live a better life. And what I mean by that, these guys are not coming here for handouts. By the way, all the 9 families that came to Allentown September, all the men are employed now. They have cars and they have jobs. And they are so proud. They leave about maybe 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to drive from Allentown to a place near Congo, Prussia, to work in a meat packaging place. Okay? So what we did for them and what everybody did for them was, it's not to give them handouts, and they don't want handouts. It's to enable them to work and find a purpose in their life. Because they didn't come to your country because one day, these guys, they said, you know, who left Syria? They were in Daraa, and all of a sudden they started getting bombed, and they had to leave for the safety of them and their children. They still love their country. They want to go back, but there is no safety. So I think what you could do for your government, instead of enclosing them in, try to find some ways to enable them to get to work, to get their kids in school, because these kids, they're there to make a better life for them and for others. They're not there for, you know, they didn't choose your country because they are expecting handouts. And by the way, if we went back and these guys, we had a safe haven for them in Syria, they would have not left Syria. These people, they're happy-go-lucky. They probably, you know, just were doing good enough in their countries. But now things have changed. So I think you enable them to work, make them speak the language. I mean, this is one of the best investment that you could do, is language. You don't want them just to keep speaking their language, otherwise they will not be able to grow. And best of luck.
You know, that's a great question, and, you know, completely apart from the pretentiousness of it all, that we would give advice to foreign governments, it really is a good question. And Susie, why don't you react to that? We have representatives here from a lot of European nations who are undergoing this great influx of Muslims from the Middle East and Africa. And if you were telling them how to handle this with the, as I said, with the sheer pretentiousness aside, that we're not in any position to advise foreign governments, but what would you say to them?
I think, Neji gave great examples of ways in which we can enable that. One thing that a group here in the US is doing is called Helping Hands for Relief and Development. I'm traveling out this summer to Jordan, to the Syrian refugee camps there, to interact with the children. And I think that's the bigger goal, because yes, we can get the parents jobs, we can allow them to grow and develop and focus on just making sure they have the resources they need to keep their family going here. But it's the children of those families that are really going to make a difference, because it's those children who are going to face bullies day in and day out in school. It's those children who are going to face the same problems that we all worry about for our children, the teasing, the taunting. But they're going to have the added baggage of internally feeling like, who am I? Do I belong here? What is my country? Where do I go from here? So I think our goal, all of us, around the world, is to reach children, is to educate the children, is to connect with them, is to make them feel and understand, again, who they are, to be proud of who they are, Syrians who came from Syria, whether they are Muslim Syrians, Christian Syrians, or even Jewish Syrians. But they are people who left their homeland, left their country, and had an opportunity to start again. And regardless of what mean things youngsters might say to them, they can still be proud of who they are. And I think that's where our engagement and our empowerment really has to begin, with the youngest of those families, not necessarily the oldest, because it's the youngest that are going to be our America in the coming years, or our Sweden, or our Germany, or wherever it is that they're settling. So create programs to educate, create programs and safe spaces for those children to grow and feel encouraged and to understand the transition, and not to feel like they're constantly on the outside looking in.